My mom's boyfriend tried to make me his girlfriend, so I agreed. But the whole time, I was secretly manipulating him. And when he finally noticed, it was already too late. My mom was a single mom who had collected a history of almost 40 boyfriends by the time I turned 15. By this point, we were living in our third home, and this one was in a desert. But despite everything, I loved my mom. I was smart enough to know that what she was doing was neglectful, but I also knew her home life was 100 times worse. Plus, she had me at 17 and got kicked out of her house right after giving birth, so it wasn't like life ever gave her a fair chance. But sometimes, I did wish that I could be a normal kid, one who had a mom taking care of them, instead of the other way around. Especially when one day, my mom was laying on the couch in our room, slipping in and out of consciousness. I went through the usual procedure, lightly tapping her, CPR, recovery position, cleared the area. Usually she wakes up, and everything's fine, but this time she didn't. So I ran into the living room to use the only phone in the house, except her boyfriend was on it. I timidly asked if I could use it, and explained the situation. At first he ignored me. Then when he realized I was going to keep pushing, he finally hung up. But just when I went to grab the phone, he blocked my path. When I looked up at him, there was a smirk on his face. Fear ran through my body. Damn, so you really want to call an ambulance for your mama, huh, sweet thing? I went cold. My entire body was shaking, and he told me all I had to do was give him a kiss on the lips, and the phone would be mine. Well, at that moment, my head was empty. All I could think about was my mom lying on the couch, minutes away from death's doorstep. So I did it. I still remember how it felt when he shoved his cold tongue in my mouth. That was the story of my first kiss. Luckily, my mom was saved, and she used the gift of life to go harder with the substances, and life got even better. You see, up until that point, I was severely underweight from only eating one meal a day. Meanwhile, my mom was eating one meal once every 2 days, and it was usually just bread with some Spam meat. But that's where her boyfriend came in. He promised me he would bring me to whatever restaurant I wanted for dinner every day. Immediately, my eyes went wide, because I had only been to a restaurant once, and it was to use the bathroom. His only condition? I had to be his work wife. So I agreed. But there was something he didn't know. I was more than just a slightly traumatized 15-year-old. I knew how to play games, even his sick one, and it was one I would win. He thought he was manipulating me, but I had him right where I wanted him. The next day after mom came home from the hospital, Rick pulled me aside while she was knocked out on the couch again and told me he'd take me to McDonald's if I wanted. I hadn't had McDonald's in like 3 years, so I nodded real fast. The last time I'd had it was when this social worker took me out for lunch while my mom was being questioned about some shoplifting charge that eventually got dropped. I still remembered exactly what I ordered, a Happy Meal with extra ketchup, and how I'd saved the toy, a little plastic minion, until it finally broke 6 months later. He made me hold his hand on the way to his beat-up Camaro, which made my skin crawl, but I kept thinking about those fries and how I was going to order a large everything. The car itself was this weird point of pride for him, even though it was probably older than I was, and had mismatched doors from some previous accident. In the car, he kept putting his hand on my knee, which I hated, but I just focused on the plan that was forming in my head. I remember staring out the window and dissociating a bit, something I'd gotten really good at when things got too uncomfortable. See, while most kids my age were worrying about homework and crushes, I was basically getting a PhD in survival. I knew Rick wasn't the first creep in our lives and probably wouldn't be the last, but something about him felt different, like he wasn't just passing through. He had this look in his eyes like he was setting up shop, and that terrified me. I could tell he wasn't just interested in my mom like the others. He saw an opportunity with me, a vulnerable kid with no one to protect her, and that made him about 1,000 times more dangerous than the losers who just came for my mom's supply of pills or her disability check. At McDonald's, I ordered enough food to feed a small family. Double cheeseburger, large fries, chicken nuggets, a McFlurry, the works. I even got an apple pie because why not go all out? I think I actually moaned when I took the first bite of that burger. That's how pathetic my life was at that point. Rick seemed pleased with himself, like buying me a $12 meal made him some kind of hero. He kept making these comments about how he took care of his girls and how he knew what kids needed, all while watching me eat with this weird intensity. While I was eating, he explained what being his work wife meant. I'd keep him company when he wanted, be nice to him, which made me want to vomit. And in return, he'd feed me and maybe even buy me things sometimes. He made it sound so transactional, so matter-of-fact, like this was a totally normal arrangement, and not something that should get him thrown in prison. I nodded along while stuffing my face, not really listening because I was already thinking 10 steps ahead. I remember calculating exactly how much information I needed to gather, and how long I could string him along before making my move. The next day at school, I went straight to the library during lunch. I borrowed a notebook from the librarian, Ms. Patel, who always looked at me with this sad smile like she knew something was up, but didn't know how to help. She was one of those adults who could see through the everything's fine act, but didn't quite know what to do about it. So she just gave me extra snacks from her desk drawer and never asked for the books back when I was late returning them. I started writing down everything. Dates, times, what Rick said, what he did, all of it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this information yet, but I knew I needed to keep track. I also started researching stuff on the school computers, legal stuff about minors, about what counts as evidence, about recording conversations. The school's internet had all these blocks on it, but I figured out how to get around them pretty quick. Years of having to solve problems on my own had made me pretty resourceful, another life skill courtesy of my mom's neglect. For the next 2 weeks, I played along with Rick's little game. He'd take me to fast food places after school, sometimes to the mall where he'd buy me a cheap shirt or something, all while treating me like I should be grateful for his basic human decency. The first time he bought me new clothes that actually fit, instead of the thrift store stuff I usually wore, I remember feeling this weird mix of gratitude and disgust. Like, thanks for the jeans that aren't 3 sizes too big, but also, I know exactly why you're doing this and it makes me sick. Every day he got a little bolder with his touching, an arm around my shoulder, a hand on my back that slid a little too low. Act time, I'd stiffen up but wouldn't pull away, which he took as permission. What he didn't know was that I'd started recording everything on this ancient iPod Nano I found in a box of my mom's old stuff. It still worked if you charged it up, and I'd hide it in my pocket with the mic sticking out whenever I was around him. I became an expert at casually positioning it just right without looking suspicious. One day, Rick told me he worked as a night supervisor at this warehouse out by the highway. He was bragging about how he controlled the inventory and could borrow stuff without anyone knowing. That's when I got my first real idea. I asked him if he could get me a phone. Nothing fancy, just something so I could call for help if mom ever had another episode. He acted all put out about it, like it was a huge favor, but eventually agreed if I'd be extra nice to him that weekend. I agreed, knowing full well I had no intention of following through. I was getting pretty good at this fake smile while planning your downfall routine. That Friday, he brought me a phone. Some knockoff smartphone that was probably stolen, but it worked. I acted super grateful, hugging him and everything, which made my skin crawl but seemed to please him. Then I told him my mom was having some friends over that weekend, so we'd have to postpone our special time. He seemed annoyed but bought it. The minute I was alone, I started setting up my plan. I used the phone to take pictures of my notebook entries, backed them up to a free cloud account I created, and then started recording every interaction with Rick more clearly. I also started texting this girl from school named Jade who lived in the apartment complex behind our trailer park. We weren't really friends before, but she was always nice to me, and I knew her older sister worked at the police station as a secretary. This connection seemed like a gift from whatever higher power might actually be looking out for me for once. The next phase of my plan involved school. See, despite everything going on at home, I was actually pretty good at school. Teachers liked me because I was quiet and did all my work. I might have been dealing with a nightmare at home, but I could solve the hell out of some algebra problems. I went to my guidance counselor, Mr. Ramirez, and made up this whole story about wanting to get into college someday and needing more advanced classes. He was so excited that someone actually wanted his help that he set me up with this after-school program at the community college nearby. It was perfect. 3 days a week, I'd have a legitimate reason to not be available for Rick's work-wife duties. When I told Rick about it, he got all weird and controlling, saying I didn't need college and that he could take care of me. That's when I pulled my first real power move. I looked at him all sad and said, "But I thought you wanted me to be smarter for you. Don't smart girls know how to make their men happier?" The look on his face was priceless, like his tiny brain couldn't decide between being controlling or being a perv. The perv won out, and he agreed to the program as long as I was making it worth his while, on my off days. I just nodded and smiled, knowing each day was bringing me closer to getting him out of our lives. Meanwhile, my mom was getting worse. She was barely conscious most days, and when she was awake, she was either crying or fighting with Rick. Her arms were covered in track marks that she didn't even bother hiding anymore, and she'd lost so much weight that her clothes hung off her like she was a scarecrow. I started slipping little comments to her when we were alone. Stuff like, "Rick told his friend on the phone that you're just a junkie he's using to get to me," or, "I heard Rick saying he's going to clean out your stash when you're asleep." It wasn't even hard to do since she was so paranoid anyway. Pretty soon they were having screaming matches almost every night, with mom accusing him of all sorts of things and him calling her crazy. During one of these fights, I casually recorded the whole thing, making sure to capture the part where he threatened to hurt her. I'd gotten really good at looking totally uninterested while secretly documenting everything, another survival skill to add to my growing arsenal. The community college program turned out to be a goldmine, not just for getting away from Rick, but because I met this social worker named Monica who ran the life skills workshop. She had these kind eyes that somehow saw right through my everything's fine act. She wore these colorful scarves and had this calm way of talking that made you feel like whatever you said was the most important thing she'd heard all day. After the third session, she kept me after class and just asked me straight up if things were okay at home. I almost told her everything right then, but I wasn't ready to pull the trigger on my plan yet. Instead, I just said things were complicated, but I was handling it. She gave me her card with her cell number written on the back and told me I could call anytime, no questions asked. I tucked that card into my shoe where no one would find it. About a month into my work-wife arrangement, Rick started getting sloppy. He'd been stealing more stuff from work, drinking more, and getting bolder about the whole situation. He'd started leaving his stuff at our place. A toothbrush, some clothes, his disgusting cologne that made the whole trailer smell like a cheap strip club. He even started coming into my room at night sometimes, just to check on me, he said. I'd pretend to be in a deep sleep, and so far that had worked to keep him from trying anything too serious. I got in the habit of wedging a chair under my doorknob and sleeping with my clothes on, just in case. One night, he came home super drunk and got into another huge fight with my mom. I heard glass breaking and then my mom screaming at him to get out. He stormed into my room after, ranting about how my mom was ungrateful and how he was the only one taking care of us. That's when he said it, the thing that sealed his fate. "Your mom's useless, but at least I've got you, right? My perfect little work wife. Maybe it's time we make this arrangement more official." The way he said it made my blood run cold. I knew it was time to act. The next day was a Friday, and I told Rick I wasn't feeling well and needed to stay home from school. Mom had already left early to meet a friend, code for scoring more drugs, so it was just us. He seemed way too happy about this, which made me want to throw up. I told him I was feeling so bad that what I really needed was some soup from this specific diner across town. He complained about the drive, but eventually agreed when I promised I'd make it worth his while when I felt better. The minute he left, I sprang into action. I called Jade and told her today was the day. Then I called Monica from the life skills program, using the number on her card. When she answered, I just said, "It's KT from your Thursday workshop. I'm ready to talk now." She didn't ask questions, just said she'd be at my house in 20 minutes and to text her the address. Then I got all my evidence together. The notebook, the recordings on the iPod, the pictures pictures and videos on the phone. I put it all in my school backpack along with a change of clothes and the $237 I'd managed to save up from odd jobs around the neighborhood. Most importantly, I grabbed the small bag of white powder I'd found hidden in Rick's sock drawer the week before. I wasn't stupid enough to touch it, but I had carefully moved it into a sandwich bag using 2 pencils, making sure not to get my fingerprints on it. When Monica arrived, she had another woman with her who introduced herself as Officer Tanya Wilson. She wasn't in uniform, which was good because I didn't want to spook Rick if he came back early. I laid everything out for them. The whole sick work-wife arrangement, the recordings, the threats, all of it. Officer Wilson's face got darker and darker as I talked. She asked if she could look around, and I said yes. When she saw the conditions we were living in, barely any food, Mom's drug paraphernalia poorly hidden under the couch, the broken locks on the doors, she started making calls. Monica sat with me the whole time, not saying much, just nodding and occasionally squeezing my hand. About an hour later, Rick's car pulled up outside. Officer Wilson moved to the kitchen, out of immediate sight, while Monica stayed beside me on the couch. When Rick walked in and saw Monica, he froze. "Who the fuck is this?" he demanded, looking at me like I'd betrayed him. Before I could answer, Officer Wilson stepped out from the kitchen and identified herself. Rick's face went white. He started backing toward the door, but Officer Wilson told him to stay put. That's when he tried to run. He didn't get far. There were 2 patrol cars outside that I hadn't even seen arrive, and 2 male officers tackled him before he made it to his car. While they were cuffing him, Officer Wilson asked if they could search his vehicle since it was parked on the property. They found 3 more bags of the same white powder in his glove compartment, plus a gun that he definitely wasn't supposed to have as a felon. Yeah, I'd looked up his record at the school library. The next few hours were a blur. Child Protective Services showed up, more police, people asking me the same questions over and over. I just kept showing them my evidence, telling my story exactly the same way each time. They took me to the police station, but Monica stayed with me the whole time. She promised me I wouldn't be put in foster care if she could help it. Around 8 p.m., my mom finally showed up at the station, completely strung out and hysterical. She was screaming about how they couldn't take her baby, how she was a good mother, all while barely able to stand up straight. That's when I felt it for the first time. Not anger or disappointment, but pity. She was so broken, and in her own twisted way, she did love me. She just loved the drugs more. The cops detained her too, though they were gentler about it. They took her to a separate room for questioning, and I didn't see her again that night. I spent the night at Monica's house, which was this cozy little 2-bedroom place with actual food in the fridge and hot water that didn't run out after 3 minutes. Her cat, Mr. Whiskers, seriously, slept on my bed, and I don't think I've ever felt safer. The next morning, Monica took me back to the station where I had to give an official statement. They told me Rick was being charged with possession with intent to distribute, illegal possession of a firearm, endangering the welfare of a minor, and a bunch of other charges I can't remember. Because of his prior record and the amount of drugs they found, he was looking at a minimum of 15 years. My mom was in detox at the hospital, and they told me she'd agreed to enter a rehab program rather than face child endangerment charges. I think it was the first smart decision she'd made in years. The most surprising part came when my mom's sister, Aunt Patty, showed up at the station. I hadn't seen her since I was like 7, and I barely remembered her. Turns out she'd been trying to find us for years, but my mom kept moving us around and changing her phone number. She lived about 3 hours away in this nice suburb with her husband and their 2 kids. She cried when she saw me, said I looked just like my mom did before the drugs. CPS had contacted her as my next of kin, and she'd immediately volunteered to take me in. 2 weeks later, I moved in with Aunt Patty and her family. It was the weirdest thing ever. Suddenly having my own room, regular meals, people asking about homework and curfews. My cousins, Jake and Emma, were 10 and 12, and they thought I was some kind of rebel cool kid from the wrong side of the tracks, if they only knew. My mom stayed in rehab for 90 days, then moved into a halfway house. I talked to her on the phone once a week, and it was awkward as hell at first. She'd cry a lot, apologize a lot, promise things would be different. I'd heard those promises before, so I didn't put much stock in them. But something was different this time. Maybe it was hitting rock bottom, or maybe it was being away from all her usual triggers. But she actually started to get better. 6 months after everything went down, she got a job as a receptionist at a dentist's office. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work with people who knew her situation and were willing to give her a chance. She started sending me cards with $20 bills inside, telling me to save it for college. The first time she did that, I cried for an hour straight. As for Rick, he took a plea deal for 12 years with no possibility of parole before 8. I had to testify at his sentencing hearing, which was terrifying, but also empowering. I looked him right in the eye while I told the judge everything he did, how he used my mother's addiction to try to groom me, how he made me choose between calling an ambulance for my dying mother and letting him violate me. The judge looked like he wanted to add extra years just for that part. My mom was there too, sitting in the back, sober and present for maybe the first time in my life. After I finished speaking, the judge called me one of the bravest young women he'd ever met in his courtroom. Rick just stared at the floor the whole time, wouldn't even look at me. Coward. It's been 2 years now. I'm 17, a junior in high school, and actually thinking about college for real. Aunt Patty and Uncle Dave treat me like I'm their own kid, and my cousins are annoying but in that normal sibling way, not in the mom's boyfriend is a predator way. My mom is still sober, still working at that dentist's office, and even got promoted to office manager last month. She's renting a small apartment now, and I stay with her 1 weekend a month. It's still awkward sometimes, but we're building something that kind of resembles a real mother-daughter relationship. She's not perfect, She still gets these faraway looks sometimes, and there are days when I can tell she's fighting hard against the cravings, but she's fighting, and that's more than she ever did before. As for me, I don't tell most people my story. My friends at my new school think my parents are divorced and I live with my aunt and uncle while my mom gets back on her feet. It's easier that way, but I'm not ashamed anymore. I did what I had to do to survive, and then I did what needed to be done to get us both out. Sometimes I think about all those nights I spent taking care of my mom, cleaning up her vomit, hiding her stash so she wouldn't OD again, making dinner out of ketchup packets and stale bread. I think about Rick and his work wife bullshit, how he thought I was just some dumb kid he could manipulate and use. I think about the look on his face when those handcuffs clicked shut. And you know what? I don't regret a single thing. The guidance counselor at my new school says I should consider becoming a lawyer or maybe a social worker like Monica. I've kept in touch with her, by the way. She comes to my basketball games sometimes and takes me out for ice cream after. She says I've got a natural talent for strategy and standing up for myself. Maybe she's right. All I know is that no one's ever going to make me feel small again. No one's ever going to make me choose between survival and dignity. And if they try, well, they have no idea who they're messing with. I've been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers since I was 7 years old. That's what happens when you grow up too fast. You learn to see 10 steps ahead. Rick thought he was so smart, but in the end, he was just another loser in my mom's long line of bad decisions. The difference is, he was the last one. So yeah, that's my story. Not exactly your typical teenager drama, but hey, at least it has a happy ending. Sort of. I'm working on it anyway. We all are.